Morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We're continuing today with some more Infinity Engine modding. Today, let me adjust the camera really quick. Seems like it's a little low. There we go. Today, we're going to cover areas. We're going to cover kind of the basics of areas the same way that we've done with items and spells. And then we are... Zen Black has been kind enough to send over an area for a mod that's in progress, and we're going to do some work on that. But before we get there, I wanted to take like an existing area and kind of talk about the elements that are in an area, and just kind of give an overview of how areas work. So I've chosen, we're going to take a look at the Knoll Stronghold in Baldur's Gate. It's just kind of our example area. So, areas, just like items and spells, they've got a header that every area has, and then they have a series of repeating fields that, they can have as many actors as they need, triggers, spawn points, entrances, containers, etc., etc., etc. And those fields just repeat, right? If it's got 10 areas, you'll have 10 areas. If you have 10 containers, there'll be 10 fields for containers. And it just expands for as much as you need. Each one has a... hold on one moment. My wife is currently traveling, so I just got a text message from her. So I just wanted to reply to her really quick. So kind of the basic things that are in the bit of the block of of area that's in the block of information that's in every area. Let me try that again. This is where you designate like the art. This is where you designate basic things like whether or not you can save, whether it's a dead magic zone. Whether you can rest. For Baldur's Gate, not so much in Baldur's Gate 2. Baldur's Gate uses these area north, south, east, and west. What these does is like for this, like if you were to touch the northern edge of this map, it would reveal Bear River on the world map. Baldur's Gate 2 doesn't use these so much. Usually it will reveal areas via script on the world map. And then these are transition flags. Like if you were to leave to the north, you need your party. And then you also have your basic information about the area. This, like indoors or outdoors, this can affect how spells work. For example, like Call Lightning only works outdoors. This is what it would check to see whether or not that spell works. Weather depends. Like if you're indoor, obviously you don't want it to rain. City, forest, dungeon. These are used for character sound sets. You know how like every character makes a comment about when they're in the wilderness or whether in the city or in a dungeon. These are the flags that tell them you're in a forest or a city or a dungeon. Extended night. Certain areas like the Shade Lord Temple in Baldur's Gate 2 is an extended night area, which means that every area has like a night and a daytime set of graphics. If it's extended night, it will always, no matter the time of day, it will always use the nighttime graphics. So it's like the one place I could think of where it's definitely used is the Shade Lord Temple. And then can rest indoors just basically means you can rest there. And here you've got some more weather probabilities. And then you start getting into the, how many actors are in it, how many triggers, spawn points, entrances. And then depending on that, then you've got your actor blocks, triggers, spawn points, etc. So those are going to be a little bit easier if we just look at the area graphically. So this is the Knoll Stronghold. And this is what I love about Near Infinity is you can just pull this up. So I'm not going to talk too much about making the area graphics because it's very difficult, and the number of people who can actually make areas in the Infinity Engine are actually very, very few and always have been. Assifer, Lava are the two most prolific, but also like Cov and Yovanev, and obviously Zenblack and their group have somebody who's making areas as well. So they're not the easiest thing to make. I've only made one ever, and it was basically I took an existing area and just flipped it and then changed a few minor graphical things. So I'm no expert. I'll refer you to, I believe both Yovanev and Assifer have tutorials on making areas. I would refer you to them for how to actually make an area. I'm talking mainly like from a graphical sense, but I will at least go through what composes an area and where all this art comes from. So all of the art that's here is stored, is called the tile set. So in the originals, it's actually a TIS file, which is short for tile sets. In the EEs, these are stored as a PVRZ. And the reason that was done is because PVRZs give you better compression so that the area art took up less space. And we needed to do that so that for the mobile stores, they had like a size requirement. Like the apps could only be a maximum of a certain size. And so we used the PVRZs to get them below those size requirements. That's why the format was changed. The area itself doesn't have a lot of flexibility for how it can change. One of the ways you can get around that are like doors. Doors let you change a few tiles at a time. But generally, like if you wanted to have like a tower collapse or something, big changes like that are very, very difficult. If you take a look in most of the time when the Infinity Engine has a big change like that, what they do is they'll literally just change the area. So if you, like in Icewind Dale, when you're in Dorn's Deep, there's a forge that you light. And it changes from like a dark, cold forge to a bright one with like flowing metal and stuff. It's literally a different area with a different tile set because the changes are too extensive to just do them as like doors. The same is true for things like in Baldur's Gate 2, the Diarni's Keep, right? When the trolls are controlling the keep, like there's there's like heads on pikes and stuff in front of the keep, and then afterwards there's like a nice little cemetery outside. They do that also by changing the entire area. So rather than trying to just do that as like a door or some other little graphical trick, I believe the Shade Lord area also changes so that it will get out of that perpetual night cycle. So if you're trying to make an area and you need like major graphical changes, you're almost always better off having like a duplicate area. Does this even have any doors that I can show? I don't think it does. Yeah, one thing this area does lack are doors. So otherwise I could show you, like this would light up and I could be able to show how things look open and closed. So that's the tile set. On the originals, you also need what's called a MOS file for when you pull up the mini map. It uses the MOS file as the mini map. On the EEs, it will just take the actual tile set and shrink it down and use that as the mini map. So the MOS isn't quite as important. There's also a WED file, which is used for overlays. Like I believe all this water is from the WED file that overlays it. Again, I'm not going to show you how to do any of this because myself personally, I don't understand it well enough to explain it anyway. I just want to go through the parts of it. And then every area also has 3 bitmaps: the search map, the light map, and the height map. The search map is important. I'm going to go ahead and overlay this. Now, these are bitmaps, but they're also at a substantially lower resolution than the area itself, so you notice how it's all blocky. So the search map has 2 functions. One is it gives you a very rough idea of where you can travel in the area, right? Like all this pink are places you can't walk. Same with the black. That's an area you can't walk. Same with the light gray. You'll notice that like the dirt path has a different color than the bridge and the stone. And that's because the search map controls the footstep sounds that are played when you walk through a surface. So like if you walk through here, this is the ISDP. It's got a little search map of what each color means. So you get the wooden footsteps when you walk across here. You get the dirt footsteps here. You get stone footsteps here. So the search map broadly tells you where you can and can't walk, and then what walking sounds to use. So that's the search map. The light map is basically the area lighting, and this controls, like, when your character kind of fades out because the light is dark, or when infravision kicks on. This can also affect your stealth rolls, because you get penalties when you're in full light. That's determined by the light map. The Null Stronghold is very simple. Pretty much everywhere is in bright sunlight, with a few shadowed patches. But for the most part, the shadowed patches are generally where you can't walk, with the few exception of the pits. So the light map is very simple in this. And then the height map, also very simple. I don't think I've really seen too many interesting height maps. The height maps are used for, one of the few places are like, where's a place that has an interesting height map? Oh, the when you approach Spellhold into like the actual asylum, there's a place where a bridge goes over and the characters walk underneath it. You use the height map to indicate that while they're under that bridge, they're actually under something, so it doesn't look like they're walking over it, so they fade out when they're under the bridge. That's controlled by the height map, not the light map. These are all just bitmaps named exactly the same as the area name. Like I said, the main one that's important here is the search map, because this gives you very broadly where you can walk. You can further refine this with doors and wall groups. Wall groups themselves are actually very complicated and tedious, and the people I know who actually make areas have always said, like, wall groups are the worst thing about trying to make about making areas. So, and then one other little thing to point out on the search map. You notice how on the very edge there's this teal strip. The teal is special. That basically means you could leave the area on these edges. So you'll notice there's no teal here. So even though you can walk to the edge of the map, you can't actually leave the area here, but you can leave it to the north, and you can leave it to the east. And when you think about where the Null Stronghold is, right? It's in the southwest corner of the map, so that makes sense, right? There's no exits west, there's no exits south. So that's your very basic area overview. The other important thing in an area is every area has an area script. Can be assigned an area script. Most areas have it. A handful don't. It's usually named the same thing as the area by convention. Doesn't have to be. And the area script is just an area that runs all the time in the area and can control events and other stuff that's going on there. One other thing to be aware of is that the game uses a system called master areas. And so I'm going to pull up the 2DA for that really quick. At all times in the game, you are in a master area, and it updates when you move to a new master area. So the easiest way to think of a master area is think about, like, if you're in an area of the city, right? If you're in, like, the Bridge District, for example, in Baldur's Gate 2. The Bridge District itself is a master area. From that, you can go into a house, or you can go into an inn, or any of the buildings inside the bridge area. Those areas are not master areas. So even though you're inside, like, Delisar's Inn in the Bridge District, or you go to the Five Flagons, your master area remains the Bridge District. So the whole time you're there, the area script from the master area always runs. So even though you're inside Delisar's Inn, the area script for Delisar's runs, and the area script for the Bridge District runs. So if you're making a new area, you need to think about, is this a master area, right? Because if you don't designate, like, your new area as a master, you might get a script running from where you came from. So and to make it a master area, it just needs to be listed in this file. That's literally it. And like I said, the main value of a master area is just that its script runs until you go to a new master area. So that's kind of the only thing you really need to worry about in terms of master areas. So let's come back to the Null Stronghold. And like I said, it's so much, because we're talking areas, it's so much easier to do all this stuff with the visualization. So I'm going to turn off the search map. Now, within an area, you could have actors listed. These are all the actors that are defined in the area file itself. You could have further actors spawn via the area script. They don't have to be listed at the area proper. Depending on what you're doing, it's, especially for mods, if you're doing an existing area, it's almost easier to script in creature spawns than it is to actually go in and alter the actor block of an area. So unsurprisingly, these are Knolls. Obviously, it's the Null Stronghold. You also have what are called regions. Now, these are a little harder to see, so I'm going to zoom in a little bit. Let's bring this to 100%. So the keen-eyed among you will notice that we have some regions that aren't here by default. That's because we're looking at the Null Stronghold as changed by the new version of the calling. So the calling adds these 4 regions. These 4 regions are entrances to new areas that it's adding. Regions can be a couple of things. In this case, these regions are entrances. These are transitions to another area. Yes and no, right? It depends. Like for me, if it's a brand new area, it's probably easier to do an actor block. If it's to an existing area, it's easier to script. It's just preference. I'm sorry, that's for Zinmock was asking whether for new areas, whether it's easier to just script them in or do actor blocks. If it's a brand new area, either works. Personally, I just script them, but there are some things you can do with actor blocks that you can't do with scripting, and I'll get to that in just a moment. But first, I kind of wanted to go over just the broad things about areas. So regions. These regions right here, these are area entrances. Regions can also be used for traps, right? So if I wanted like a trap on the stair, I would make a region here and then designate it as a trap. And we actually are going to make traps later. The other thing regions could be are, I don't think there are any actual traps at the Null Stronghold. The other thing they can be is like info points. When you're in an area and you click on something and it gives you a little bit of text, those are also regions. So generally, transitions to other areas, traps, like floor traps specifically, and info points are your 3 major types of regions. Entrances. So anytime you're coming into this area, I'm going to go back out to the full area. Anytime you're coming into the area, you need an entrance point. So this is, let me pull that up again. This is entrance 3, known as exit 5200. So from the world map, when you click on the Null Stronghold, it says to use exit 5200. So this is where you enter when you come into the Null Stronghold from the world map. These are ones that I've added for the areas that these 5 entrance points are new for the areas that we've added. The entrance points basically like when you're exiting from the area attached to this, it says, hey, use this entrance points. And then the other thing the entrance point says is when you come out, you need to face a certain direction. And then these 3 are the existing ones for the caves that were there before. So those are entrance points. We don't have any containers here. The other one are, I don't think we actually have, we do have ambient sounds. As you walk around an area, like these, I'm pretty sure are almost all water burbling. So these will play, and they play like distance based. So as you cross the bridge, you'll be very close to these 3 or 4. Yeah, the ambients are all named river. So you'll hear like the stream gurgling or water running. Those are all done by ambience. And so as you walk away, like if you're over here, you're going to be far away from the ambience and you're not going to be able to hear them. So these are very Proximity. That's what I'm looking for. These are proximity driven, right? The further you get away from them, the less you hear them. Ambient sounds can be used for everything. Here they're being used for water gurgling. You can use them like when you're walking around Athkatla or Baldur's Gate, when you hear like the background crowd noise. That's almost all ambience. You'll also hear ambience. You can also use them for like if there's a stove with a fire burning, you can use like a fire crackle. Just anything that's kind of background noise in the area that is location based, you use an ambient for. Now, we don't have any doors or background animations in this area, so I can't show you that. But so that's kind of visually. So we can look at these things in the area file itself. So I talked about how, so let's pull up an actor. Now, if you spawn a creature via script, you basically say, I want it to spawn at these points. I want it to use this creature file. And that's kind of it. The nice thing about having an actual defined actor block is this right here. If you want a creature to only be here in the morning or in the evening or, just a specific set of times, the nice thing is you can time gate it. You can't control this via scripting. If you script it, you basically make it appear. And then if you wanted it to disappear, you'd have to script it to go away. So the nice thing on actor block is it gives you this. Everything else that's here is just, I don't want to say, it's more or less internal information, like the X and the Y and the destination. So these in an area file that is just in the game, these are going to be identical. But for example, if a creature is moving and you save the game, like these would be different because you've captured it. There's a difference between where it is and where it's going. For the most part, these, at least in the area work you're going to be doing as a modder, these coordinates should match each other. And then the facing, which direction the actor is facing, is also, you can control that if you spawn a creature, but that's kind of the other big thing that you need to worry about. But like I said, the main thing is if you need to have a time-gated creature, this is it. And then also just what creature file to use. This name that is set here, if you want, and this is how it works in Icewind Dale by default. So if you were to open Gnarl, I'll just demonstrate. So Gnarl has a script name of Gnarl. If for whatever reason we wanted him to have a special script name, we could give him something unique here and then tell it to override the script name and use, like, if this was something different and we wanted to be like, new Gnarl or something. If you toggle this, then his name in this file becomes his DV. Like I said, that's how Icewind Dale works by default, and Icewind Dale EE works by default. But for the most part, the names here are just descriptive. One of the things you'll see, for whatever reason, birds in Baldur's Gate are almost all named like Bentley Mirrorshade. I think they just made one accidentally with his name and then just copied it over everywhere. So, we've got two right here. This is just a bird that flies around, but for whatever reason, it's a Bentley Mirrorshade. Again, this name is meaningless unless that flag is set. So, but that's just your very, very basic actor blocks. Triggers. So we talked about triggers. So you have, like I said, you have three types of triggers. Travel triggers are what you use to transfer from one area to the other. Like you'll click on it and your party will walk to it and then they'll go through it and they'll transfer to another area. And when they get to that area, this is the entrance point they use in the new area. The cursor, there's a fixed number of cursors. This is generally you use like the little door with the arrow through it. The cursors are found in like cursors.bam. For the most part, just find what other areas are using and use those. Bounding boxes. So you'll notice we have this door has 5 vertices, and they're defined down here, right? So these are the 5 points that it uses to have that it uses to draw the actual entrance and form the actual region. The bounding box needs to encompass on all sides those vertices. Why it uses bounding boxes, I don't know. But just make sure that your bounding box encompasses all of those vertices. And then let's see what else we got. Oh, flags. So party required. This is, you must gather your party before you venture forth. If it's not party required, you can send 1 or 2 party members. If it is required, everybody needs to be there. Locked and trapped resets aren't really a thing for travel triggers. Cannot be passed by NPCs, right? This is, whether non-party members can use this transfer point or not. A lot of these are also just for traps. If it's an information point, this is where you designate the string that appears when it gets clicked on. Is trapped detected. These are if it's a trap. And then launch points, these are when the trap is set off. These are the default coordinates for where the, like if it's a fireball trap, these are the coordinates. Obviously, these aren't relevant for a travel trigger. Key and script. Every region can have a script. Unless it's a trap, it usually doesn't. One notable exception is, for example, the Baldur's Gate 2 from the bridge district. It checks to see if you have a rogue stone. That's done through a region with a script. Right, the script is what checks to see if you have the rogue stone, and then if you do, it teleports you into the new area. It's not kind of your traditional. It's not kind of your traditional travel trigger. And we'll be making some of these, so we can go into this a little bit more. But that's your basic. That's a basic region. The number of vertices you have is as many as you need. Right, if it's just a simple square, you just use 4. If you want it to be, like if it's an arch and you really want to match that arch, you might use, 5, 10, 15, 20 vertices, however many you need to make it look nice and match. So, for example, I added, let's see. Well, let's see. Let's just pull up the area again. So like I added this one, this arch, and you can see I cut it a little place. I think I would guess this is maybe like 10 vertices, 9 vertices. So, it just depends on how, you can see I missed a little bit here on the edge. So it's just a matter of, like this one's just a simple quadrangle. This one's same. Only 5. So just however many vertices you need to cover the area. So that's your regions. What's up next? Spawn points. So the Knoll Stronghold in particular, if you've visited, gnolls come out of everywhere. And I don't think this shows spawn points. Oh, it does show spawn points. All right. So spawn points are obviously where you can spawn monsters. And so let's just pull up this one. So it has an X and a Y, and then it has a list of creatures that can spawn there. And it can be up to 10. And not necessarily unique, but these are kind of the pool that can be pulled from. You have the number of creatures. This is a maximum that get spawned by the spawn point. So you'll most get 2 gnolls, 2 gnoll A's, or 1 of each. The encounter difficulty, the ISDP will go more into this, but the encounter difficulty is basically, like with 2 creatures, this isn't quite as important. But if we had like 10 if we had a maximum of like 10, it would basically, if we were to look up gnolls you see that it has a power level. It will spawn creatures until it either hits its maximum number of creatures or until it hits the power level. And this is what it uses for that spawn point calculation, this XP power level field. And then all these other things like the spawn rate, the method, the duration, wander and follow. Oh, I'm sorry. Here's the maximum spawned creatures. I'm sorry. The number of creatures basically refers to how many are listed here. I'm sorry. Yeah. Here's the maximum spawned. So this will spawn up to 4 gnolls, and it can be any combination of these two up to the encounter difficulty. So everything else, the duration, the distance, the ISDP has more information on this, but these are basically for fine tuning. You know, if you defeat these 4 creatures, how long until more show up? Or how long until the spawn point recycles and creates 2 creatures? If you wander far away from a spawn point, will these creatures disappear and spawn new ones when you come back? Right? These are what all these factors control. The ISDP will go into this in far more details than I will. Same thing, you have time, so you could have spawn points that only work at night. Baldur's Gate uses this a lot more than Baldur's Gate 2. For example, when you wander in the wilderness at night, what you'll have is you'll have 2 spawn points on top of each other. One will be daytime spawns and one will be nighttime spawns. And, the daytime spawns will be, hobgoblins or, X-Farts or whatever. And then, like, your nighttime spawns will be more undead. So maybe like a ghast or a ghoul or some skeletons. So you can have, different creatures depending on the time of the day. And then whether or not it's active or not, this can be controlled by, you can turn spawn points on and off, and regions too, for that matter, and ambience via scripting. So if you want an area to be like, you could have like 20 spawn points and just make it a monster fest until you defeat like the big boss, and then turn off all the spawn points and all the monsters disappear. So, or you can have it shift where, if you come here as a level 5 party, you'll get these spawn points. And then if you come back as a level 10 party, you've got a harder series of spawn points. So you disable the lower level spawn points and enable the higher ones. So, like I said, these can be controlled via script, whether you turn them on or off. And then just more stuff for, here's the frequency, here's the countdown, and then weightings for the spawns. So the ISDP will go into far more information about how it does all these calculations. And you can have, let me bring this back up. You can have, obviously the Gnoll Stronghold has a ton of Gnolls. So you can see we've got 17 spawn points, which is not what you're going to find in a typical area, but it's obviously meant to be a stronghold full of Gnolls. So this is how you do it. Now I mentioned entrances. So let's start with, this is the entrance from the world map. And entrance points are very, very simple. You just have an X and a Y and then your orientation when you enter the area. So this is the one coming in from the world map. It is this one right here. So it gives you an X and Y, and when you come in, you're facing west, right? Because presumably you came in from this direction, so you're facing west. Entrance points, they need to have unique names, because if you have 2 name the same thing, the engine won't know which one to use. And I think we'll just pick the first one that's listed. So just make sure they have unique names. Otherwise, XY orientation, about as simple as it gets. You can see we've added a whole bunch for the 6 or 7. Is it 5 or? I think we had 6 new areas here. Yeah, I guess, 5 right there. So yeah, entrances are super easy. Ambience, remember we had a whole bunch of these in the area. Basically, you give it an X and a Y. The radius is like how far away you can hear it. The volume is, you can fine tune this, whether it's supposed to be a loud noise or a soft noise. The actual sound file itself. Now you'll notice there can be up to 10, and that's because you can have different ambiences. Like in the city, you have like the background murmur, and every so often you'll hear like somebody call or say something, like a vendor calling, it's basically randomized. That's all one ambient, and they'll have like 5 different sound files, and it will just randomly play one. This is basically like how many sounds are here. And then the base and the interval will be how often it should play, how often it should repeat. And again, you have the times, right? So if you have ambience that you only want to play at night, like for example, if it's a lit torch that only shows up at night, you only want this to play at night. And then you can enable them or disable them. You can also enable and disable them via script, and then whether or not it loops. If you ignore radius, I think it's like a global. It plays through the entire area regardless of proximity. High memory ambient. I think this is... Yeah, the high memory ambient in the original game, if it's like a big sound file, you could turn that off in the options to, like, if you have a low-end PC. Obviously, that doesn't matter so much for the ease. That's your ambience. Okay. Oh, and then songs. Okay. I'm not going to touch on songs because music files are a whole thing, and you'll notice very, very few mods add music to the game. It's because it's a huge pain in the butt. But this is, so I'm not going to cover like how to add music, but this is where you designate like what music plays during the night, what music plays if you get into a fight, what music plays after the fight, whether you win or lose. There are also alternates. I don't think I've seen alternates used. I could be wrong. I don't usually mess with area music too much. And then these are like ambience for the entire area. This is just background noise that plays. I believe these loop. Yeah, like here you can hear these are just like the wind blowing. And then you can set basic volumes for those. And then finally, rest encounters. So this will be if you try to rest in the area, you will have a probability that they will spawn. And then otherwise, you notice this looks very much like the like a spawn point, right? You've got a list of possible creatures. But in addition to that, there's also strings that appear. So if it spawns in Xvart, it will show you the string. But then same thing, right? Number of creatures, the difficulty, the max spawned creatures, and then how probable it is that they're going to be spawned. The ISDP, again, will have like the breakdown on very specifically how it calculates how many creatures to add and what these actually exactly precisely mean in a formula. So one moment, let me load my nose here really quick. Apologies. I realize that without my wife here, I'm doing all the work for the horse, so I'm spending a lot more time in grass and hay, which I'm super allergic to, which is why they've been so bad all week. So, all right. So that is kind of your basic area overview. Now, one thing that the Null Stronghold does not have are containers and traps. So I'm going to pull up another area really quick that does. We didn't make any changes. So let's take a look at, yeah, I think we've got both here. All right, so this is a new area from the calling. Now here, we do have a trap. So let's take a look at how the trap works. It's a proximity trigger. Again, we have vertices defined, and the bounding box contains all of them. The trap can be detected, and the trap resets. So if you trigger the trap, you can trigger it again until you disable it. You've got difficulties for detection and removal. You've got it flagged as trapped. Now, if you don't want a trap to be detectable or removable, 100 is a special value, right? If it's exactly 100, it cannot be detected. If it's exactly 100, it cannot be removed. And these are important because traps are used, I mean, proximity triggers are used for more than just your conventional traps. They can be used for, like, SOD uses traps. They use regions like this to determine, like, they use them to trigger banters, right? So if there's a big area and your party walks over it, it will prompt a banter between characters. They're used, for example, in Baldur's Gate 2, you'll see they're called rep traps. And they're just tiny little areas. They can't be detected. They're not flagged as conventional traps. But, like, if you're low reputation, those reputation traps are what spawn, like, the paladins that pop up and attack you when you have, like, 2 rep. So proximity triggers are more than just kind of conventional traps. They're your catch-all for, you know, an area of the map that you want to do something special. So again, no info point because it's not an info point, but and then the launch point is where it targets the trap, and then the payload is actually in the script. So there's there's a lot of GT scripts here. GT is ground traps. There's also a ton of CTs. Those are container traps. So you can find a whole bunch of ready-made traps that you can plug into unless you want your trap to do something special. Take a look at what exists because there's probably something that wants. So this is GTAR 8. Let's see what that does. It just shoots an arrow fire, or a fire arrow at the person who strung it. So basically, if entered by anybody, so if anybody enters this region, it just basically shows trap sprung and then hits them with an arrow. That's it. It's about as simple as it gets in terms of traps. 40 detection, 40 difficulty, and again, because it resets, you can trip it again and again and again. If you wanted this just be a trap that fired once, you just remove the reset flag. So that's a very, very basic, simple trap. We also have a container here. You can see a ton of vertices. And so this is our first container. So the location X and Y is, okay, so 854 and 464, which is going to be, it's going to be like here. For containers, usually because they're on terrain that's not passable, you need your X and Y not on the container, because that's going to be like, you know, if the party's standing here and I click on this container, they're going to walk to that X and Y to open the container. One of the things we fixed repeatedly in Baldur's Gate 2 in the fix pack was they would have their X and Y too close to the container. So if you've ever seen like a character walk up to a container and then get close and then start stuttering, it's because what's happening is they're trying to reach an XY that is on impassable terrain or doesn't have enough clearance. So always offset your XY for containers. Make sure it's on passable ground, and then make sure you have enough standoff from the container. You want it to be close enough so that it's plausible that, you know, the character can reach into the container, right? You could put the XY here, but then it looks silly that they're standing here opening this container. So you want it to be close, but you don't want it to be right on top of the container because otherwise the character will stutter. So the type, this, when you open a container and, you know, on the bottom bar, like the contents appear and there's a little icon next to it, this is where you set the icon. These are fixed. So you have to use something that's here. If none of them feel appropriate, you can always use non-visible. But, you know, if it's a bag, if it's a chest, if it's a drawer, if it's just a ground pile, you know, these are your options for existing containers. And like I said, if none of them work, use non-visible. Containers can be locked. They can be trapped themselves. So you'll have, very similar to the ground regions, you get your trap detection difficulty and removal. Is it trapped? Is it trap detected? We should also have a locked in here. Oh yeah. Lock difficulty. Same with trap detection. If a lock is exactly 100, it cannot be lock picked. It can be higher or lower than that, but if it's exactly 100, it cannot be locked. Or I'm sorry, it cannot be picked. Here's where you'd set whether or not it's locked. And same thing, you've also got your trap you've also got your trap scripts. So this one is not trapped, but here's where you would put, like I said, one of those CT scripts. So most of them are just a trap strung. And then like the CTAR, these are all arrow traps. It should also be like a fire FB, I think is like a fireball trap. Yep. So there's all sorts of nice off the shelf trap scripts. In this case, we've got, wow, it went all out. So it's got 22 it's got 60 vertices. And then if it requires a key, this is where you would say what item is the key. And then if it does have a key, often you'll put like that, the little message that pops that says you can't, it's a magical lock and you can't pick it by normal means. This is the string that would pop up if you wanted it to have a key. So, but very simple. And then also the items that are inside of it are also here. In this case, these are all fixed items. None of this is random loot. Yep, all that is just normal items. And then each item, just like when they're listed on a character or anywhere else, right? You have quantity and charges. You can set them as identified, not stolen, or undroppable. So that's a very, very simple container. And then we also have animations on this. So you'll notice we've got a fire pit. We've got 2 other fire pits. We've got torches. So let's show the actual animations and let's zoom in on these. So these are BAMs that are being played on the area. And these, I believe, are all existing ones. None of these were custom or new. So, right, some very simple things, right? They need a location. If it's, for example, if you want torches to only play like at night, you can set up a schedule. The actual animation that is going to play. And then these kind of control like little fine-tuning things for the animation, right? Is it shown? Is there a shadow? Will wall covers it? If it's a WBM. Don't remove in combat. The original games, to save memory when you got into combat, it would turn off a lot of animations because, obviously these were computers from 25 years ago. It's not so much needed now, but that is something you can do. The Z-axis, translutionary, all this stuff, again, consult the ISTP, but for the most part, generally, if you set an animation, it will just sit there and just play endlessly. And like I said, these are all off-the-shelf animations that were existed. Like this one is Fire 3, Fire BRN, and I'm guessing this is, and then the Torch one too. Yeah, I mean, so small little touches like this bring your area to life. So if you've got, places where you can add lights and light sources. The other thing that's worth noting too is that this isn't actually a fully 3D rendered, Baldur's Gate, the Infinity engine is a straight 2D engine. So the light that's being provided by this fire is actually in the tile set, right? You manually make this area lighter in the tile set, right? This isn't casting light and lightning that through some engine process. This is literally the area graphics are lighter here. And same here, right? Those glowing coals are just part of the area. So the nice thing is we have animations here that we can take a look at. I'm not going to cover wall polygons because they're ugly. And we don't have a door, but we do have one, I think, in the interior. Yes, we do have some doors here. Way down at the beginning of the area, I think. Not doing this at 400% is probably easier. Okay, yeah, there they are. We had doors here somewhere. Okay, and now I'm going to zoom in because they are hard to see. Oh, And then it resets me up to here. That's annoying. Okay, here we go. Okay. So this is where you come in to this area, and these doors are blocked off. So this is a door, and then it's being drawn closed right now. When it's open, you notice the door disappears, and then this becomes open. So impeded door cells, these are something that you designate in the door itself. So when the door is closed, basically all of these green cells you cannot cross. And then when the door is opened, you can now walk freely through here. Doors are a whole other thing that are generally done in the tile set, because this artwork, like that, let me turn off the overlay. These bars are actually part of the tile set. And so depending on whether the door is open or closed, it uses different tiles for this area to effectuate the doors. So and then doors are actors, triggers, entrance, containers, doors. Okay. You're going to see a lot of the very similar things before. Is the door locked? Can you should you have visibility through it? These are just iron bars, so you can actually see through the door. If it's a solid wood door, you would not use the look-through doors. Doors can be trapped. Doors can be forced through strength if it's supposed to be a secret door, and if it needs a key. If it's the type of door that once you open it, it cannot be closed. The door located in the door secret, I forget exactly what these do. Check the ISDP. And then again, right, we set our vertices. You have a bounding box for when it's open. You have a bounding box for when it's closed. Impeded cells, like I said, these are the little areas that you cannot cross while the door is closed. You designate those as well. You can have opening and closing sounds. There's a cursor when you click on a door. And again, right, you've got traps. You got trap detections. In this case, it does require a key. And if we wanted to trap it, it would have a script, but it does require the key. So you notice the door is locked because it needs a key. And because there is the lock difficulty is 100, you cannot pick this lock. You have to use the key to open it. And then you notice you've got open and close X's and Y's. This is like the containers, right? If I'm somewhere else in the area and I click on the door, my characters are going to walk to this X and Y to go and mess with the door. So just like with the containers, you want your X and Y to be a little bit off the door so that your character on an actual walkable area, so your characters will walk up to the door and then open or close it depending on the current state of the door. Doors can also be opened and closed and locked and unlocked via script too. So you can have a door where when you open one door, it opens another door, that sort of thing. Or when one door closes, make sure that the other door closes as well in case there are like two entrances to an area. So those are just very, very simple doors. So I think we've covered kind of all of the basics of areas. So I think we're almost an hour in. Let's take a break. I'm going to grab a cough drop and some tea, and then we'll come back, and we're actually going to pull up the area that Zenblack provided, and we're going to add some traps. We're going to add some regions. We're going to add some enemies. We're going to add some spawn points. We're going to see and see what else maybe we want to add. So let's go ahead and take a quick break. We'll be back in a couple of minutes, and we'll go from there. All right, welcome back. So this is a work in progress map that Zen Black has provided me. It does have a search map, does have a light map, does have a height map. Right now, it currently doesn't have any. You'll notice there's no actors, there's no regions, entrances, or containers. So we're going to add some of those. So one thing I did want to back up really quick and talk about was, so far we've been doing all of this. We've been looking at areas and talking about how to do stuff purely in near infinity. Now, if you're doing a new area, probably using near infinity is far easier, right? Adding a container in near infinity is substantially easier. However, if you're working on an existing area, obviously you want to use Waidu to patch it. So the good news is that, let me pull up my edits to the existing area. Where's my... So the good news is that Wisp provided a whole series of macros called the FJ area structures. And these are all documented in the Waidu documentation directly. So there's an entire section on them. These can do any area structures, including deleting them, that you would want to do. So everything that we're going to be doing here in NI, you could do via these macros. So basically, you basically say what type of structure it is. These are your options. These are all the structures that are available in an area. If you want it to be delete, you put it into delete mode. Debug if you want feedback. And then if you, in case you need the offset, like what container number it is, this is how. So for example, these are edits I make to the existing Null Stronghold as part of the calling, right? So we're adding a travel trigger. We've got the bounding boxes. We've got what cursor to use. We've got the flags. You can see I've listed out what the flags are. The X and Y coordinates. There are my 9 vertices. This is a region that I'm going to name CD Null Underground, the destination area, and then the name of the entrance when you get there. So this was all stuff that we saw when we pulled up the region in Near Infinity. So that's one. Then I add an entrance point. Then I add yet another travel region. And then I add an entrance point to match it. Yet another travel region. Yet another entrance. Another entrance. Once again, another travel trigger. A matching entrance for it. You guessed it. Another travel trigger. Another entrance. Another travel trigger. Another entrance. And then I'm also adding map notes in case this is an area like Tutu needs map notes. So I basically add some map notes to the new structures that I'm adding. So everything that we're going to be doing here with containers, with traps, with regions, with information points, with spawn points, FJ area structures can do it all. So now, depending on what structure type you're using, like you notice, like if you're using this to add an actor, these are the variables that you have available to you. If you're adding an actor, if you're adding a region, these are the variables that are available to you. If you're adding a region, because right, the stuff that you need for like an entrance, the entrance is basically four pieces of information. Whereas as you can see for a region, there's a lot more information. So we're going to be doing all of this work in Near Infinity, but this FJ area structure function is available for you to do it on the fly with Waidu. So like I said, if you're doing a new area like we're doing here today, I would just edit the area directly with Near Infinity. If you're editing an area that's in the game, like an existing area, like I had to do for the Knoll Stronghold, use this function. So, but I mean, you'll see as we go through, all of these correspond to all the information that we're going to be setting. So let's pop back to our area. So one of the things that, let's start off with some regions, right? So this is an entrance to another area. So is this up here. So let's start making a very simple region here. So the very first thing we need to do is we need to figure out our vertexes. So let's zoom in on this. Well, let's do the one over here first. There we go. Okay. So on this one, I'm just going to do a very simple 4-point region. And, well, actually, first let me pull up the search map, make sure that... Okay, this is kind of important. You want to make sure that your region is on traversable ground. So what we need to do is we're going to designate this whole thing as a clickable region, this whole entranceway. But we need to make sure that the XY points are here, because the white is places we can set, right? If we put the XY here, then what would happen is when you click on the door, they're all going to try to walk to a place that they can't, and they're going to get jammed in the door. You want it to be a nice point out here that they can all reach. So let me turn off the search map for a moment. So one of the things I really wish Near Infinity had was a way to, you notice I've got X's and Y's down here. I wish there's a way I could drop a pin and be like, remember this XY, because the thing is, like, that's 4307, 2382. But if I accidentally move my mouse, then it's going to give me a different point. So let's pop back here really quick, and let's go ahead and we're going to add oh yeah, these are triggers in Near Infinity speak. So first let's give this a name. This is going to be, we'll call this the Eastern Door. Whoops, let's take off our caps lock. We're going to call it the East Door. This is a travel trigger. I said I'm going to use 4 vertexes. So I'm just going to add those first. And now let's go back and grab our first vertex. So we're going to, let's just say 4302, 2388. 2 and 2388. There's our first vertex. The second one's going to be up here, let's say. To make it purely vertical, I'm just going to keep the X as 4302, and now 2095 is going to be our second. Let me get that before I forget. This is going to be 4302. I know it's a little tedious getting these coordinates manually. It's 4421 to 2229. I want to say 2229. And then I want to keep that X because I want the edges to be straight up and down. So this is also going to be 4421. 4421 and let's say 2518. All right, so we've got our coordinates. Like I said, this is going to be a very simple 4 coordinates. Now, we need to set our bounding boxes, right? So the left edge of this is our lowest X value, which is 4302. Our highest X value is 4421. That'll be the bounding box on the right. The highest is going to be 2905. That'll be our top bounding box. Our lowest bounding box will be the minimum value, which is going to be 2229. Okay. The cursor, I'd have to look. I think 30 is the standard. I don't know what the destination area. We're going to set this up as a travel area, but we're not going to. This is where you like the area that you're supposed to be traveling to. This would be where you'd set it. And then say we don't know the entrance because I don't know what area this connects to. I also don't know what the entrance name is going to be there, but if this is supposed to, this is ZB0700. Let's assume, and they can obviously change. Whoops, they can change this later. That ZB0701 is going to be the area that it connects to. Oh, I did XB. And this is going to be one of the very nice things you can do for entrance areas, and this is probably a good habit to get into, is you can also name them from ZB0700. That helps you keep track of entrance points, which is really, really nice. I believe from what Zen told me that this should be a party required. Like, you don't want, this is very much you must gather your party before venturing forth. It's not info points. That doesn't matter. There's no traps. Now the launch point, this is, I can't remember if it's the launch point or the activation point. Like I said, these are going to be your X's and Y's for where you walk to. So I'm going to put it like here. 4328, 2462. 4328. And 2462. And because I can't remember if it's the launch point or the activation point, I'm actually just going to copy these and use it as both. And just like that, we should have a travel region. So let me save this. And now I believe if we view area, oh, it's still using the old. All right, let's refresh. And now pull up the area. Now when we view, we should hopefully have, yep, we've got a region. So as you can see, we've done something wrong. I would say that one of these coordinates is hilariously incorrect. I'm going to say it's this one. And that should be like, so vertex 2, obviously I've got the Y value wrong. It's not 2879, but maybe more like 2074. I think this should be. That also means that the top bounding box is also wrong. Oh yeah, this is okay. Yeah, I see what I did. Okay. All right, this is one of the nice things about having this visual checker in Near Infinity, because otherwise you'd have to open up the game, and if you use Control 4 will show you all of these. So, all right, let us save this again. Click off, click back in. That's more like it. That looks like an entrance. So we can zoom in. I hate that it jumps to the top. And I'm too far south, aren't I? Okay, there we go. Let's zoom out just a little bit. So not too bad. If anything, I would say that this is probably, coordinate 2 is probably a little high. In fact, I would say both of those probably need to come down to maybe about 50 pixels to make this a straight with perspective. The good news is players can't actually see this, so if it's not perfect, it doesn't matter all that much. As long as players are going to be like, oh, that looks like the door, let's click on it. As long as it's got pretty good coverage of where you think they're going to click, you're good to go. So we now have a region that will take you to ZB0701 and drop you into from ZB0700. I'm reading this down here in case you're wondering. So that's where it's going to take me when I click on this. Now, the other thing you should always think about is if I have a travel region to an area, I need an entrance point for when people are coming back from that area. So we want an entrance point here, because if you're coming out of this building, you're gonna want the party to appear here. The other big thing, this is something that, like, I have many things that I'm very, very, very anal retentive about for entering an area. I checked probably a few thousand entrance points for the BG2 fixed point, because nothing is more obnoxious to me than when you come into an area and your party is facing the wrong way. So in this case, let's just go to 100. So in this case, where the party comes out is very clear, right? You want them to be here. But you can have your choice. Should they be facing this direction, because they just came out of that door, or because the walkable path is to the south, should they come out and then face this direction towards where they're naturally going to be walking next? In this case, I would say either one of these answers is valid, right? And the reason why this is important is so many places, especially when you're walking to a tight area with combat, if the orientation is wrong, you end up with the very goofy situation where your backliners are suddenly the frontliners. In this case, it's unlikely that there's going to be an ambush waiting for you here, but it's still good practice, right? If these guys come out and they're facing north, it looks sloppy and bad. So in this case, I'm going to have them face this direction, which is southwest. So we're going to make an entrance point first let's make the entrance point, and then so we're going to come back. This time we're going to add an entrance. We're going to name this, again, I'm just making up the fact that this connects to ZB0701, so we're just going to call this ZB07 from CB0701. We want the party to be facing southwest when they come out. And we're going to put the coordinates 4203, 2493. So 4203 and 2493. So now we have the reciprocal entrance. Well, first, actually, let me save this. Is there any way to... Oh, I think I can just refresh this. Huh. Oh, because I don't have... Okay, maybe I do need to click out of it and click back in. Of course, it's also possible I put that entirely in the wrong place. Oh yeah, the entrance is off from where I want it to be. Let me turn off the search map. Yeah, that's a little too far west than where I wanted it. So I want that to be like 4282, 2519. Okay, so we'll just adjust those coordinates just a little bit. And like I said, when they come out, they're going to be facing south. Actually, the more I look at it, we might want it to be west-southwest. Turn it just a little bit more. Okay. And we'll save this up again. Save, overwrite. Okay. So that is a very simple... We've added a door. We've added an entrance for when people come back from that area. So they're very, very simple, right? There's an entrance. There's a travel trigger to another area, and then the reciprocal entrance. They had also asked about turning one of these into a container. So let's pull up the search map. First, let's see which of these are walkable to make these a container. Now, notice that a lot of these tombs are not... Well, actually, let's zoom in a little bit. Let's bring this up to maybe like 75%. So we've got these nice tombs here, any one of which we can turn into a container. Now, they are slightly off the walkable path. However, we can still make these containers, because remember, with a container, you can set an XY off the container. So let's make this particular building here a container, and then we'll put the XY here. So that when you click on it, they'll walk to a walkable area, but then access this container. So let's come back here, and I'm going to say, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, maybe 8. We'll try 8 vertices. And I know that's obnoxious to trace out vertices, but it is what it is. All right, so let's come back to the area. We're going to add a container. This is going to be, we'll make it an altar. Most tombs, I find, tend to use the altar graphic type. It's not going to be locked. It's not going to be trapped. Not trapped, not locked. And we'll get to all those in a moment. And we'll also add items as well. It's not going to require a key. Okay. So first, the activation point is going to be like out here at 1238 3000. Where is it? There it is. 1238 and 3002. Oh, and this is going to be, we're just going to call this tomb. Most of these names are internal. Like this, like tomb is never going to be exposed to the player. So you can name this, you know, this could be tomb, or this could be tomb with special item, or it could be, you know, trapped tomb. The players aren't going to learn anything because, again, this information is never exposed to them. And actually, you know what? I think this also needs to be the location. All right, again, it's not locked. It's not trapped, etc., etc. Okay. I guess it's going to need 8 vertices. No, that's 7. Let's do 8. All right, so let's start with our... And actually, hold on. It might be easier just to do this. All right, so we got 1169, 2085. $29.85 as our first vertex. We're coming out here to 1076, 2924 to here, 1066, 2838. I mean, the most tedious part about this, obviously, is doing the vertices. To 1098, 2773. Then we're going a little bit to here. 1132, 2786. Then we're coming up to here, which is going to be 1225, 2881. And then finally, to finish it off, to here. I'm going to keep that X value. I know I've moved the cursor, so we're going to keep that at 1225 and 2940. Okay, so I need 7 vertices, not 8. And it'll automatically connect your last and your first vertice. So you don't have to specify this one again, right? It knows that I'm going to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then it knows to connect that last little bit. So you don't need to make it a full circle. It knows to connect your first and your last vertice. So now I've got the coordinates. Let's come back here. Okay, so the first one is going to be, yeah, it's a lot faster to do it this way. 1165, 2985, that's vertex 1. Vertex 2. Oh, how annoying. Oh, that it doesn't quite, it doesn't remember the window position. 1076 and 2924. Vertex 3. And 66.
28, 38. And actually, you know what? I'm going to move these over to my second screen. I know you guys can't see them anymore, but it'll be faster than trying to resize these windows every friggin' time. 1098 to 2773. So yeah, you can see area stuff, especially when you start getting into like multiple vertices, gets very, very tedious very quickly. And doing this via YDO isn't any better because you still have to specify all these coordinates. And now 1225, 25, and 2881. And then finally 1225 and 2940. And it turns out I did not need that final vertice. So first, let's quickly do a save and see if we've got those vertices anywhere near where they should be. This is always a good sanity check. And let's also turn off the search mag. That looks pretty good. Oh, that does not look pretty good. Okay, both of these, vertex 1 and that vertex needs to come down. So vertex 1, let's increase the Y to 3004. And yeah, the other thing is also expect that you're going to have to go back in a couple of times. 3004. All right. And then, so I want to bring that one down to 3004. I want to bring this one down to 2964. That was our last vertex. 964. And that, like that one isn't bad, but that one, that is, let's see, that's vertex 0, 1, 2, vertex 3 needs to be 1103, 2768. 1103. Sorry, vertex 3 needs to be 1103. Shoot, what did I say the other number was? And 2770. That'll be good enough. Now, container outlines I'm a lot more picky on because this will be visible to the player, right? When you hover over a container, the outline shows up. So something like this right now, the player would see this and this frankly looks terrible. So that's why we're fixing these vertices. So, okay, let us save. And let's see. Does this update those? Oh, it does. So yeah, see, that looks a lot better. You could still maybe play, like maybe bring that one in a little bit. Maybe make this a little bit better parallel. But for the most part, that's pretty spot on. That's where you want it to be. The containers, yes, the vertices, but like I said, you're going to have to write down these containers one way or the other. So whether you're doing near infinity or whether you want to do this, at least initially with the FJ area structure in YDO itself, like if you're right, this is how you would do vertices if you were using FJ area structure. So it's the same thing, right? You're going to need to find these vertices. For me, the tedious part is finding the vertices and then inputting them. So whether you're finding them and putting them in a text document or whether you're finding them and using near infinity where you have to click through a couple times, it's tedious kind of no matter what. Your choice of which tedium you want to do is entirely up to you, right? You certainly could do this in the area copy. If that's easier for you, then by all means do that. But it's the same thing, right? You're gonna have to set up however many vertices you think you need and then copy and paste them in. So it's just, it is what it is, right? This is one of the reasons why you'll see people like, especially like when there's an arched or a curved surface, you're not going to get a lot of coordinates because at a certain point people just go, okay, that's enough. That really is enough. All right, so that's our container. So we've done the container. Let's drop back into it. We need to do the bounding box. So what's our lowest X? 1066. That's our left bounding box. What's our biggest X? 1225. That's going to be our right bounding box. Top is going to be our lowest Y, which is going to be 2786. And then our biggest is going to be 3004. All right, so now we have a container. It's using the altar. It's not trapped. It's not locked. No special flags are set on it. Let's add some items. Come on. There we go. What's some good generic loot? Potions. Let's do... let's do Potion of Fire Breath. Why not? We're going to do one. None of these are important. All right, let's also do... Let's do a random scroll. Aren't the... I can't remember the random... Okay. R&D Treasure. All of these look up from the random treasure tables. I'm not going to try to go into how the random treasure tables work. The IESDP is going to be a much better option for that. I think, though, I want to tap into the scrolls directly, which I thought were... Are those just... Okay, hold on. I am going to have to bring up the random treasure tables. Yeah, save changes. Because I can't remember... So when you say random treasure, these are the columns that it picks from. Is one of these like a scroll column? We've got random magics. I honestly can't remember how you do random scrolls directly. All right, let's just put in a scroll then. I'll just put in a scroll directly. Let's go back to our container. Let's put in a scroll of some type. Let's do... Spell Thrust. And then I think Zen, I'm going to pull up my Discord really quick because Zen mentioned that they had a custom item that we could place here. And I'm just going to... Oh, of course, Discord needs 17 updates. Okay. I'm going to let that work in the background. Because he mentioned that they had a cool katana that should be placed in the tomb. Boy, Discord's really thinking about it. Let's see. All right, let me grab the res ref. Okay. All right, so this is a special container. Now, obviously, this is not in the game, so I'm just going to put this in as a string. Now, I don't know if the item has charges, but if it did have charges, this is where you would set them. So if it had something that was like a 2-time-a-day ability, you would want to give it 2 charges so that the item is found charged. But I don't know if the item has charges or not, so I'm just going to leave those at 0s for now. None of those flags apply. So let's go ahead and... So we've got a potion, a scroll, and this katana are now in this tomb. So let's go ahead and save our changes. Okay, and how do you make a container in the format of a body I want to loot? Is there not a way to have random treasure of, say, TOB level? So the random treasure tables, let me bring this back up. So you'll notice that I have like multiple R&D treasures. And so if we go back to, actually, I'm going to bring it up in the ISDP instead so that we can look at the notes on it too. So the good news is, if this is an EE exclusive mod, we have the Icewind Dale style random treasure tables available, which is nice because those give you a lot more flexibility. If it's going to be a mod that goes for OBG 2, then this is what you're limited to. So let me bring up the random treasure. So you've got 5 levels, right? Poor, average, well off, wealthy, or rich. And you'll notice here we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. This tells which row we're going to use out of this random treasure table. So if you do the rich version, notice how most of these refer you out to another table, right? It could be Amulet 12, Amulet 13, 10. We could look up what those are. If it's just a number, it's gold. So like, if you were to rich, it rolls 2 to 20, and it refers you out to and let's say you roll 2 or 3. It rolls you out to random magic 02. So let's pull up the random magic table. So basically it could pull through multiple tables. So now random magic 2, these are now your options. And again, you can see it can take you into yet another table. So these are what's available if you just use the existing random tables. Now, that's random TREAS. That's random treasure. Random Trez without the A is the Icewind Dale style random treasure. And in this case, you basically add your own row, give it a name, and then it's basically a 1D, however many columns you want to specify, of random loot, right? So if we were instead to put in R&D AR 002, it would roll 1d3 and you'd get one of these 3 arrows, right? If you did a random wand, you would roll through these 5 wands as your option. So if it is an EE only, if it's an EE only mod, you have random treasure available. The other thing that you can always do on either game is you can also, containers and regions are objects. So anything that you use to give an item to a creature, you can use to give to a container. So very simply, we've named this container just Tomb, right? We've named it Tomb. So we could write a script that basically says if just some throwaway variable like if global ZB 0700 random trez, make it a local an area variable. We can hold on, let me change this into so we do BAF so I get my markup. We can use something like give item create. Excuse me. Okay, just because I always forget the syntax. Okay. So we can do something like this. We want to set the global so it doesn't repeat. And then we could repeat these for as many options as we want. So we could do, some sword. We could do some hammer. We could do some scroll. We could do some potion. All right, so you put this into the area script, and it'll say, okay, we haven't assigned a random treasure. And then it picks through. In this case, I've weighted these 4 options as equally, and it's going to give item create to the tomb. And then these are the charges. Depending on the item, you want these to be 0s or 1s or whatever. So this is a way you can do random treasure without having to use the random treasure table, right? You've basically said, if I come to this area, if this global is 0, which it is by default,
then do one of these 4 things. Each one of those sets the variable to 1 so that it doesn't repeat. And then I'm either giving tomb, again, the containers are an object and you can target them by their name. I'm either going to give it, whatever potion I pick, whatever sword I pick, or a hammer or a scroll, or however many you want to do. So you can do random treasure via scripting. You don't have to rely on the tables. And this works on the originals. This works on the EEs. This works on everything. The other nice thing about this is you can also tailor this to if you only want, if you wanted, say, a different loot table if the PC was a monk, or if the PC was a shaman, or if the PC is of a certain level, or, because this is now a script, you can put whatever triggers and conditions you want on this. So if you really want to do random loot, I would actually suggest doing something like this in the area script. This is going to be your simplest way to do it, rather than relying on the random treasure table. So, again, right, tomb corresponds to the container's name. Like I said, this becomes an object that you can now target with items. You can also destroy items, right? You can change anything that targets its inventory targets what's here. So actually, let me remove that because we're not going to do something random. So that is another option for doing randomized loot. So let me go ahead and bring this back up. Yeah, we're how many layers deep in this? I just want to save this. Save, overwrite. Okay. Let me close the other 2. All right, so that is a very, very simple. We've done a very simple container with just some throwaway items that you guys can customize to whatever you want. And like I said, you can use a script like this to randomize what's inside the tomb. Or like I said, you can customize it to whatever. Next up, I think they also mentioned they want to do some very simple traps on the bridge. So again, let's pull up the walkable areas because not all of this bridge is walkable. Yeah, so I'm thinking let's do on the little narrow part, let's do a floor trap there. And then also let's do another trap here on this first curve. I think those are both good spots for traps. And both these and the nice thing is because these are square, these are nice simple four vertices areas. So let's zoom in so we can get a better look at those coordinates. Oops. So here, we're going to do it here on this nice narrow space as a floor trap. So let's pull up my notepad. And we'll go a new batch of coordinates. Come back here. Okay. Oh, why didn't you slide? Now we're going to delete these. Okay. Coordinates are going to be 1902, 02, 1962. And then we're going to do 1885, 2028. We're going to do 1951 and 2036. And then finally up here, back to 1966 and 1972. Those are our coordinates. Okay. So let's go back to the area. We're going to add another trigger. This one is going to be a proximity trigger. We're going to call this bridge trap 1. Excuse me. We're going to need 4 coordinates. 2, 3, 4. I'm just going to put these up in the other window. I know you can't see them. All right. We've got 1902. 1962 as our first coordinate, Vertex 2 is going to be 1885. 2028. I know this is very exciting modding. 1951 and 2036. And then finally our last coordinate is going to be 1966 and 1972. Okay. So we've got our coordinates. Oh, and then let's do our bounding box while we're here. Our left is going to be 1885. Our right is going to be 1966. Our top is going to be 1962. And our bottom will be 2036. Okay. So this is a proximity trigger because this is going to be a trap. It does not have a cursor number because this shouldn't show up. It's no destination area because it's not a travel. This is the trap is detectable. The trap resets. We do not want the trap to be set off by an enemy. Like basically if a red circle walks over this, we don't want it to be set off. Same as we don't want it to be set off by a blue circle. It's not an info point. So let's make this, as I recall, this is supposed to be a fairly high area. Plus this is a Baldur's Gate 2 mod. So let's make the trap detection 70. Let's make it slightly harder to remove at 80. It is trapped. It is not detected. And the launch point should be smack dab in the middle of it. So we'll put the launch point here as 1923, 2003. 1923 and 2003. We'll duplicate these coordinates for the activation point. And now, what do we actually want this trap to do? The first vertex is off my mouse move. Okay, we'll double check that in a second. So like I said, there's all sorts of existing ground trap scripts. So let's take a quick look. I'm actually going to, let's save this really quick. And then let's go looking through our GT scripts. Through our ground traps. All right, we got power word sleep. This is really only useful if this is in the middle of enemies, which it may not be. Silence, stun, enfeeblement, spell thrust, flesh to stone. That'd just be mean. True sight, chain lightning. Death spell might be interesting because this is supposed to be like an undead area. All right, death spell, disintegrate, ruby ray, delayed blast, finger of death. Oh, I like incendiary cloud. I'm not sure if this is a high enough level to lay an incendiary cloud. But you can see, right? There's a horde wilting, there's maze, meteor swarms. So you got all sorts of options here. An arrow, piercing arrow. Lots of arrows. Yeah, the GTAR are all arrow traps. I think we want something a little bit more than that. Again, I got our Scorcher, Cloud Kill, Call Lightning, Confusion, Chromatic Orb, Charm, Fireball, more Fireballs, Frost Attacks, Flame Strikes. Flame Strike, actually, I feel is kind of appropriate. Lightning Bolt. My concern with using a Lightning Bolt on a narrow area like this is that this could be one of the things where you think you're going to do like 3d6 damage, but it's going to bounce back 18 times, and 17 of those are going to hit Airy. So I'm not going to do Lightning Bolt. Putting Lightning Bolt on a narrow area like this is just mean. Like really mean. So definitely not Lightning Bolt. Miscast, Magic Missile, Monster Summoning, Cloud Kill, Stinking Cloud. Silence. You can also spawn monsters, obviously. The spike, you'll see these in Baldur's Gate 2 when you are heading back to the vampire lair in chapter 6, and there's that big room with spikes. The little spikes that pop out of the ground, that's what these are, the GT spikes. We also got skull traps, true sights, webs. Okay. Where was the... what did I say? I said I wanted Flame Strike. There we go. So GTFS. And yes, you can script. You don't have to use an existing trap. Yes, you can make your own, right? For this, I'm just using something off the shelf because as you can see, there are lots and lots and lots of options here that already exist. But you can have, like an Icewind Dale in Crestalax's tomb. There's that one trapped tomb that it does a color spray on the party, but then it also opens like 6 doors behind them to spawn a bunch of skeletons. So you can have it where, and then also when you fight Dav in the Cloakwood Mines in Baldur's Gate, on that little hallway in front of him, there's a bunch of traps, and a couple of those just spawn monsters. I think they spawn like helmed horrors. So you can use it to spawn monsters. You can use it to do spell effects. You can use it to, do whatever you want because it's scripting, right? And the other thing is you can also tailor this by level, right? So you could do if entered anyone, but then also do like a level check. If they're below this level, like do a fireball. If they're above this level, do a horde wilting, right? It's scripted. So you can tailor you can use all of the triggers normally available to you as a scripter. Or like web and incendiary cloud, right? You can drop a web and an incendiary cloud. Or if you want to be a little bit nicer to low level parties, you could do a web and a cloud kill, or a web and a stinking cloud, right? I mean, it's because this is all scripted, you can tailor it exactly how you want it. For now, I'm just going to do a flame strike because this is a narrow area. I feel like flame strike is going to look nice on this, but again, you can do whatever you want and be as mean or as nice as you want. So let's go back to our area. We're going to use GTFS. So let's pull up our trigger, the bridge trap, and we're going to set this as GTFS. And because it trap resets, they can also set this off multiple times until they detect and fix it. So, all right, let's save this. And then if Zen Black is correct, and I have no reason to doubt he is, the coordinates I think are wrong on this trap. Well, it's not too bad. That's a little bit off to the left, but that's good enough for me, right? I'm not gonna. Let's see what that looks like without the search apps. Right, this is what the player is gonna see. If anything, actually, you know what? I'm gonna move those bottom 2 coordinates. Like the top 2 don't bother me, but the bottom ones, I think I'm gonna move to here and to here. So that one is 1894 and 2057. Oh, and what order did I do these coordinates? That is the 1886. 2020. Okay, yeah, so that's vertex 1. Okay, I want to move that down to 1892, 2055. Sorry, I'm doing this on my secondary monitor, I know. And what did I say? 2055. All right, and then I want to move this one down to 1956, 2066. 1956 and 2066. Okay. So I updated these 2 coordinates, and then because of that, I probably also need to redo my bounding box. So X runs from... Yeah, this is now 1892, and then our max X is 1966, okay. The top is going to be still 1962, but the bottom is now 2066. Okay, let us save this. Save, override, okay. Let's try refreshing. Okay, yeah. See, I'm happy with that. Because again, because of the search map, it's a nice little narrow choke point that they have to walk through. And like I said, right now it's just scripted to do a flame trap, or a flame strike, but that's about, there you go. So where are we? We're 2 hours in. So, and then you would just repeat, right? We can do another one over here. But I know that looking up coordinates and entering them slowly is not the most exciting thing. So I think I'm just going to do the one trap now you see how it's done. We are about 2 hours in, so let's take another quick break, and then we can come back and see if there's other things that we want to do in the area that we can talk through and go through stuff. But let's take another break for a couple of minutes, and then we will be back. Sit tight, everyone.
All right, welcome back, everyone. I apologize, Velos. I missed your question when we were doing this. He was asking, how do I make a container in the format of a body I want to loot? Is there an easier way? So there are two ways you can do it. I've pulled up. This is the when you're in the Baldur's Gate 2, when you're on your way to the Unseeing Eye, there is a body, and you can see you can do it this way. This is a container. This is a container with a ridiculous number of vertices. Look at that. That is 34 vertices for a container to do this. That is one way you can do it. Let me turn that off, that outline, so you can. Well, you can barely even see this. Oh, I hate that it keeps resetting me up to the top. So that is one way you can do it. The other thing too is you can put in, you could just create a creature, make them dead, flag them as a permanent corpse. So they would just, like when you, like kill an orc and it falls to the ground, it would basically have that animation, and then you could put a ground pile on top of it. Now, one thing that's very important, when you're fighting just spawned enemies and you kill them, right? They drop their loot into a ground pile. Those ground piles disappear after like 24 hours or after you leave the area. However, if it's a ground pile that's defined in the area file and it's not created from killing a creature, those ground piles will stick around. So that is a way you can get around having to do something like this. So you can just create a dead body off of a creature. The only trick you want to do there is in the creature itself. You would basically you'd want to set it as first dead. And then you also want to give it a permanent corpse. If you don't flag it as a permanent corpse, the body will disappear, and you'll just end up with this random ground pile in the middle of nowhere. This is, for example, we found a bug in the original Baldur's Gate when you're in the Cloakwood Mines. There's like that one room with the hidden ogre mage. Originally, he had a bunch of bodies around him, but because they weren't flagged as permanent corpse, usually by the time you got to him, it would just be a clean room. And so it would be really weird that you're talking about, look at all these bodies on the floor that aren't there. So permanent corpse is how you get a body to stick around. So you just make it permanent corpse, make them dead, and then add a container that is a ground pile on top of them. So that's the way around it. Because, otherwise you have to do that awful... What was that area? 0201, I think. Oh, discard changes. Yeah, I think this was it. Yes. Otherwise, you have to do this, which is a bit of nonsense. It's a bit of nonsense. So, but this is, because this is, again, 35 vertices to do that, which you just saw how long it took me to do like a 4 vertice container. 35 is going to suck a lot. So I would suggest instead get a creature, make it dead, give it a permanent corpse, and then just put a ground pile on top of it. And I think that will get your point across better than something like this. So, all right, but let's head back to this area. So the nice thing is Zinvac also gave me a couple of animations. One is a fog and one is some fireflies. So we're also going to place some animations on here to show how we can do that as well. So this is supposed to be like a marshy swamp area. Oh, and then he also said, yes, it also is, it has a nice night tile set. So this is what it looks like at midnight. We've got the nice lights over here. That looks really nice. All these windows light up. So it does have a night tile set, which is really, really nice. But for visibility, I'm going to turn this back to noon.
and back to the daytime so we can see what we're doing a little better. So I have two animations that we can place. One is fireflies, and then one is fog. So let's take a look again at the search map, because I want them to be where the player can't go so they can't mess with the animation. Animations can sometimes interact with player models a little weird, so I'm just going to put them off the path so that the player can't interact with them at all. So I'm thinking somewhere like here would be good for the fog. So let's add it first, then we'll worry about the coordinates. So let's add an animation. The animation is, the fog is like CL test. Yeah. CL test. We want this to be shown. It's not a light source. I think the rest of this should be fine. Start range, loop probability. Yeah, none of that should be, we're going to call this fog. And then let's center it, I don't know, 2414, 1665. And we're going to make this active at all times. All right, and we want the fog to play day or night. All right, I think everything else looks fine. All right, let's try saving. Then we'll come back and we'll see if we can get that to play and see what it looks like. Because I suspect, it's a fog cloud. We probably want it in a couple places, so we can actually show what it's going to look like. Now, I think what I've done is I think this needs to be set. I don't think I set the proper translucency flag, because you'll notice it looks very black. Here it is. Yeah, it's got all the black gunk on it. So I think, let's see. There is a way to tell it. I don't think it's translucency. I'm actually going to, okay, let me save this really quick, because we have some of the animations that we use for our new areas in the calling have that same kind of thing, and I want to see how we did those. Let's see, how many of these have animations? Let me turn off this. Okay, yeah, so this one is... Okay, so this one we just make very... why is that one? Maybe, okay. This one we're using is shown and no shadow, but it's not a light source. Maybe that's why it's showing up as black. All right, let's look at some other ones. Oh, that's a butterfly. Okay. I'm sorry. You can see how often I do animations. So let's take a look at... Is it this one have animations? No, that's not the area I'm looking for. Also not it. No, which one is it? Yeah, okay, here we go. Like this animation. Yeah, this also has that black outline that's supposed to be rendered as transparent. Yeah, this one is shown in no shadow. So I think those are the flags we want, because this also doesn't have any translucency set. So I think we want just the first two is show no shadow and leave light source unchecked. All right. Yeah, it's frustrating too because both EEs and the originals have different ways of handling translucency. So we actually had to make different BAMs entirely for those animations. So let's go to Area Z. Let's go back to that animation. And instead of, let's do that and that. And hopefully that will do the translation or the translucency correctly. Let's take a look. So you'll notice I'm not checking this in game because Argent has made the area viewer so good that I found that what you see here is pretty accurate to what you get in the game. Where exactly is that? Oh, there it is. Oh, yeah. See, now you... That's the thing. I went past it entirely because now it is entirely very translucent. Yep, there it is. And we can animate it. So that looks pretty good. The only thing I would say about this is we probably need multiple copies of this. You know, you need to put, 10 or 15 of these probably around on all these marshy areas to give it a little bit... to give it a little more oomph. The other thing is we might want to... I thought there's a way. Yeah, you can also mirror it too. So not every one of these, you can use the same animations multiple times and they'll look slightly different if by using the mirror. Okay, so good. All right, so that is a very, very simple animation. You might want to darken that a little bit. I wonder if we can play with the translucency with that. What does 50 translucency do to that? Will that even be picked up by this? Oh, I think that actually makes it lighter. We would want to go the opposite way. I don't think it takes negative value. So this looks good. We may want to darken it just a little bit because it barely shows up right now, and I'm very sure at night it's very, very going to... At night, this is going to disappear entirely. So, and then, yeah, you can also do random start. So random start means that, if you look at this BAM, it is 51 frames. So with a random start, it's going to pick, 1 to 51 as its starting animation instead of everything starting at 0. Because that'll, right, if you had like 4 or 5 of these and they all look exactly the same, or they all are cycling together, it's going to be much more noticeable than if they're all randomly starting from a different point in their sequence. So that would be how you place a fog. Let's also very quickly do fireflies. Let's do fireflies maybe near the tombs. So maybe somewhere like here. So let's add another animation. All right, let's add another animation. And this one is going to be fireflies. The animation is like 53 something. Yep, there we go. We'll do the same thing. Is shown, no shadow, do a random start. And then the coordinates should be, what did I say? Like here. 671, 22, 74. Let's do the fireflies just in the evening. So this would be like a night only feature. Just as an example. So from like 8:30, from 8:30 to 8:30, there we go. So let's save this again. And then let's bring up the area viewer. Now let's change this to night. And there they are. Now notice if we change the night to, if we go back to the daytime. Oh, it's still showing them even though they, Near Infinity is showing them even though they wouldn't be active at this time. So it's still showing these even though we have turned these to be off at this time. So if you were actually in this area doing these would not be playing. But yeah, at night those look really nice. And then same with these, right? You could mirror them. You could add a couple more. There are also, in the day, you could use, there are a number of places that have just like flies. So if you think back to in Baldur's Gate, like the caravan that was attacked with the Silver Shield kid, there are like dead horses and there are flies playing on them. So there are also like fly animations that you could just put, again, because this is a marsh, flies would be everywhere. So you could put those everywhere and have those just be during the day, and then at night you get fireflies instead. The other thing you might want to do is pair this with like a buzzing noise. Like I know the flies have a buzzing sound that goes with them. In fact, let's go ahead and just bring up that area really quick. That is, let's see, probably caravan. Oh, I don't want the console. I want the area listings. All right. So we want area 2800. All right, let's jump back to Baldur's Gate really quick. So I'm pretty sure, if I remember right, that caravan not only has dead flies, but I believe it also has an ambient sound that goes with them. Because that's another way. It's nice if you have animations, but if they also have sound, it adds that extra little bit of immersion, right? If you have a fire burning, it's nice to have the little animated fire, but then if you also have like the wood crackle that goes with it, it's a really nice touch. So let's see if my memory has served me correctly. So let's come down here to the caravan. Yeah, so these little BAMs, it's probably going to be hard to see. Let me change this to daytime. Let's play the actual animations. Oh, yeah, they're very hard to see here. Let's zoom in. Oh, I don't have to re-scroll. We're at the... I think we're... Yeah, here it is. So, yeah, you can see the little flies buzzing. And they've got 4 clouds of them. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And I think this is also where the bodies are placed. So the flies are actually on the bodies. Yeah, so you can see the flies are on top of the 4 corpses, including the dead horse, the dead person. This is the Silver Shield kid. In fact, let's show the actor animations. Yeah, so this is what it looks like with the actors loaded. So you got flies on them. And then, okay, yeah, let's zoom out. Actually, no, let's not zoom out. So you can see, get back here. Okay, so there aren't actually fly sounds directly on them. Let's zoom out just a little bit. Yeah, so you notice they've got ambient sounds right on top of them, and the sound itself is going to be... Yeah, so there you go. You got flies, and then you got the fly buzzing sound. So there you go. And they're paired together, right? So you got the fly, you got the animations, you got the body, and then you got the fly sound playing over them. And I'd be willing to bet these actors are... Yeah, so see, here you go. This is the trick about using the body. You mark them as dead, you give them a permanent corpse. So that body will never disappear. Oh, hello, Choco. And then, do we have containers on those guys? We do not. Should I turn off the actors? Do we have containers on those guys? I don't think we do. Let me go back to the area. Sorry, my cat has just decided to say hello. Hello, Choco. Hello, Choco. Just wants a little bit of attention. Hi, Bun. So, and then Zenblack was asking, is there a skeleton creature animation? Just use a skeleton. Just use a skeleton and mark it dead, and then you'll have a skeleton lying on the ground. So, and then the same trick, right? You mark it as, you flag it as dead, and you flag it as a permanent corpse so that it doesn't disappear. And then like I said, I think, let's check the containers here. I want to say there's a ground pile here, but I'm not sure. Sword, a shield, and a misc. Yeah, I'm thinking like he has a little like a silver shield symbol, but I think I'm confusing that. I think BG1 NPC adds that as part of a Kagan quest, because everything that's here is just right. You've got a ring and a. Yeah, I don't think any of these are actually part of the caravan drops. But it would basically be this. You'd basically add a container, center it on the body, and then yeah, make it a ground pile just like this. Maybe this is on top of the kid. What are the rough coordinates of let's see. Silver Sheet Sun is around 3825 for any of these containers near that. Yeah, this one is practically right on top of it. So they've done that trick. This is a ground pile that sits basically near all the bodies. So this is Avelos. This is your example of how to do it. And it doesn't show up in this because it's like a tiny like 10 pixel container. So that's why when we click on containers, they're here, but they're on top of the bodies. Yeah, so this would be your trick instead of doing the 36 vertex outline. So yeah, but this is a handy technique, right? You have the fly animation, and then you have the sound, and then I believe, are these time gated? I didn't check. Yeah, so they have the same thing. The flies are only out during the day. The sound only plays during the day. I'm willing to bet that those animations also only play during the day. Oh, the flies are there all day, but the sounds are not? That's weird. Oh, this is the actor. I'm sorry. Let's start off the actors. And the imps, because I want the actual animations. Yeah. So just like real flies, they're not out during the night. So during the day, you get the fly animations, and you get the buzzing sound. So those are always nice touches to add. And then, yeah, Baldur's Gate uses spawn points everywhere. So, all right. I think that's kind of that's what I had as my to-do list for the area. One thing that Zen Black did ask for that I am not going to do is music for an area, because like I said, music is a colossal pain in the butt. So, adding music files to the game is kind of a big pain in the butt, because if you look at music files, and I'm just going to pull one up, even when I read like the IESDP description for these, they're hard to follow. So adding a music track, there's a Waidu command called add music, and it will add it to song list. So song list basically has a, track 47 is BC1, track 48 is, BD2, whatever it is. So, and those are the numbers that you actually use inside an area to tell it what music to play. But if you look at the music files themselves, like this is BC1, so it's telling you, okay, use the BC1 folder. And then this is the order in which you play the tracks. But then also, if it gets interrupted anytime, you need to have music that it can basically swap out to. So instead of just having one big piece of music, you basically have to cut up into, like, this is the intro part of the music, this part loops. And then for each one of those segments, you have to be like, okay, if I need to interrupt this music for combat, I also need like an outro so that I can then start combat music. So It's very, very complicated, and I've never done it. And even just reading the documentation in the ISDP is hard to follow. So I would say if you're going to add music, rethink it, because it's kind of a pain in the ass. And it's frankly something that I don't, like I said, I've never done it. I know that Cat has done it. The G3 does have like an alternative soundtrack of music that Cat put together, the Ace Fez put together. But she did it, and she's not really active anymore. So I don't, you could look at that for ideas of how to do it, but I think what that does is that replaces existing music with new music. So I'm not sure that it does the full new Muse files, breaking things up. The other thing is all these pieces of music are also in ACM, so they're also in a different format than like the waves and the augs that are in the rest of the game. So what you can do is, remember when we looked at areas, there are songs. Here we go. Actually, let's choose something with an actual. Let's go to Candlekeep. All right. So Candlekeep uses BC1 as its battle music, but then you can also set just ambience to play in the background. And these could be where you would, if you just wanted a music track to play, you could use it as an ambient instead of actually setting a proper battle song. So that's an option. Because, yeah, I mean, it's just, I've never added custom music. There's a reason why there are very, very few mods that do, or if they do it in like a sneaky way. Like, for example, a lot of mods will have a like romance track for their NPC, like as in like a romance music for their NPC. And what it does is that if you look at like the original romances, like let's pull up BG2. Actually, let's go back to here. So if you look at somebody like Aerie, right? Whenever Aerie has a love talk with you, right, it starts playing her romance theme. So let's see if we can find this in here really quick. I think it's play song. Yeah, so here we go. So whenever you have a love talk with Aerie, it plays play song 34. What is 34? All right, let's go to song list 2DA. 34 is mkaerie.music. Yeah, I would suggest getting another area and basically copying over its music. And mkaerie, or is it just Aerie here? I think it's... Should be here. Is it actually just a straight up hog? I don't think it is. See, this gives you an idea of just how familiar I am with how music works in this game. So, okay. The point I was getting to is that the existing, Jaheira, Viconia, Animan, and Aerie all have like a proper song with a proper music that plays. What NPC mods do to avoid having to mess with this is that they will use play song 0, which kills whatever music is currently playing, and then they'll just do a play sound, which lets you just play like an AUG or a WAV file directly. So it's just like one sound file with like the entire theme for the NPC. Now, the benefit of doing like a proper music track is that like when you are having a love talk with Aerie, like her romance music will play in a loop as long as it needs to, like dynamically until you're done with the love talk. And then it will segue nicely into whatever follows. Or if you end up if you go through, if the banter is really short, when you end it and if it's still playing and then you go into combat, it will gracefully end and then the combat music will start. Whereas if you are using the trick where you're just playing a wave file as like a play sound, what happens is it will simply keep playing, and then you'll have, like, if you go into combat, the battle theme will just start playing over it, and so you'll have two pieces of music conflicting and trying to play at the same time. So it's a trade-off, but it's pretty much everybody has decided that's a better trade-off than trying to make a proper Muse file, because they suck. And they're just not easy to work with. I mean, I understand why, because you need music tracks to like fill the space. So you need parts of it to loop, and you need to have exit points for every one of them in case combat starts, or the combat music needs to have exits for when combat ends. But it's just very, very few modders have found it worth it to bother with it. So I would say, my wife just sent me a text message. So, I would suggest grabbing music from another area and using that as a base instead of trying to write your own. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't use like musical stings. Like if you want to have like a boss battle theme, you can use that trick where you just play like an OGG file directly. And one of the ways you can do that is you can, in the area file, basically set it to no music at all and have it just play ambient noises. I mean, that can also be a little jarring, but it is done in some places in the game, so it's not entirely weird. But that's also an option too. So, but just adding music sucks, right? I mean, there are certain things in this engine that it just sucks to do, right? I mean, creature animations suck the worst of all. Making new areas is difficult. You notice that we talked a whole bunch about adding stuff to an existing area. Making the actual area sucks. There's a reason why very few mods do it. Like new creature animations, new weapon animations. There's all sorts of things that are just not really, the engine does not make it easy to do. We're very fortunate that we have tools to make a lot of the stuff that used to be really difficult really easy, but there's still some stuff that even with the great tools we have now are still big pains in the butt. So, but honestly, I think we've kind of worked over areas with everything that you could possibly want to see. We touched on spawn points. We touched on rest spawns. One other thing. So, let's talk about rest spawns a little bit more. So let's pull up like the government district. Rest spawns don't have to be hostile. So this is the government district. The government district, as its rest spawn, spawns a guard. All the guard literally does is walk in and say, hey, get out of here. You can't sleep here. So rest spawns don't have to be hostile. You can spawn literally anything as a rest spawn. So, and you'll notice it's, this guy very specifically is a very specific creature that basically says, you can't sleep here, get out of here. So rest spawns can be anything, right? They can be hostile monsters, or they can be, in a case like this, somebody running you off and saying you can't sleep here. And then the other thing that I want to point out is pretty much everything that's here you can activate or deactivate via script. Right? So actors, obviously, there are a whole bunch of, there are script commands you can to remove actors, tell them to move around, make them go away, etc. But all the rest of these, all of these can be, their names are script objects. So you can target these with scripting commands, right? Like we showed how to do that, the random item with the tomb, right? So you can use give item create on a container, right? You can also tell it anything that works on an inventory, you can essentially use on a container, right? You can tell it to destroy items. You can add it to add items. You could have it take parties from the item, take items from the party, right? There are all sorts of fun things. Like in Watcher's Keep at the very first level where you have to put the candle, the bell, and the book in the altar. it basically runs a script that says, hey, if I have these 3 items, activate the statues, right? So containers, what is inside a container is script wise, you could treat it like it's their inventory. So, and then the other thing, this is also how you control areas. So if we look really quick at like the bridge district, I'm going to open this up. So if you're a bard and you get the playhouse, right? If you get I'm going to zoom in here. All right, so here's the 5 flagons. Oh, and here's a good example of all right, so yeah, and here's a good example of a trap that's not a trap. So this is a region that basically, if you have Hair Delise in the party, it prompts them to have a dialogue. Right? This is not an actual trap. You can't detect it. But basically, if Hair Delise walks over it, it basically prompts them to have a dialogue. Come on. So if Hair Delise specifically is over me, if I've not actually had this talk before, then I'm going to start a dialogue with player 1. So this is a good example of a trap being used for as not a trap. And then this is one of those. Is this a rep trap? This is also a trap, but this is like in chapter 2 where you keep seeing scenes where the vampires are fighting the shadow thieves. These are done as proximity traps. So depending on how many of these you've seen before, it will fire up one of the vampire versus shadow thief fights that you see throughout the evenings until you pick a side in chapter 3. So, and you can see that's just a tiny little trap. And instead of like an is over me, it does a range, right? When you come within 20 feet of this trap, it'll check to see if we should have another fight, right? And it also does like a time check. So if it's between midnight and dawn, then you might see Harishan fighting 3 shadow thieves. And then it also makes sure that you won't see another fight for another 12 hours. And then the Vamp Shadow War basically determines these encounters happen in sequence. So that's the first encounter you'll see. This is the second one to the third, etc., etc. So that's, and then I think somewhere in here there's a rep trap. That's a Bodhi trap. That's where the Githyanki spawns to get a silver sword back. Thought we had rep traps here somewhere. Vampire Shadow Thieves. And then Githyanki. Huh. Oh, that's the near a cutscene trigger. Okay, there are rep traps. You'll just have to trust me. Okay, so let me try to get to what I was actually talking about here. So it's hard to see here, but there are actually 2 transition triggers here, because the 5 flagons. There's the 5 flagons, and then there's the version of the 5 flagons that you get as the stronghold. And so if you take possession of the Bard Playhouse, like normally the transition is to area 0509. But if we look in the area script, let's see if we can find it here. That's the animate stuff. That's the Fallen Paladins. Did I scroll past it? I must have. Yeah, so here you go. So that door will either take you to the 0522, which is the version of the Playhouse that is the stronghold. So when you first come into the area, it disables that. And then later, if you become the possessor of the Playhouse, it then deactivates the old entrance to the 5 flagons. So there's actually 2 versions of the 5 flagons. You have 0509 and you have 0522. And so depending on which one of those is supposed to be active, it disables one of those 2 transition triggers. So you can, if you want to have a door lead to different places depending on, where you are in a story or whatever, you can disable transitions as you need to. And that goes for any regions, right? You could also enable or disable information points. You can disable rep traps, floor traps. You can disable ambience. Anything can be enabled or disabled via script, because again, all of these things can be targeted as script objects. So I'm trying to think of a container example. Oh, the infravision container in SOD. There's that one area that has a container that you can only see if you have infravision enabled, either because, it's an elf, or you actually have the spell or the ring or a helmet that provides it. That's a case where the container is disabled, and then if it sees somebody has infravision, it enables the container, and then it suddenly becomes visible to you as the party. So, like I said, all of these area objects can be targeted with scripting. And so you'll see little tricks here and there with stuff like that. I'm trying to think of any other stupid, like the old Dave Letterman show, right? Stupid area tricks. That we did actors, triggers, spawns, entrances, containers, items. Items only matter inside a container. You'll notice that there's also like variables and projectiles. These are also, remember, the areas are stored in the save game. So the first time you enter the bridge district, this gets copied to your save game. And then imagine like if you're in the middle of combat and you cast a web, the web gets stored in the area. So there's never going to be a time where you as the modder are going to be adding a projectile, but that's why projectiles are in the area, because if there's an active web, or if there's an active cloud kill, or a meteor storm or whatever, these are stored in the area file until they expire. Oh, and then auto map notes too. This auto map notes are also a nice little touch that you can add. Hold on. Let's see. Auto map notes. So yeah, I mean, if you have points of interest in your area, feel free to add them. Try to avoid spoilers, right? You don't want to put like, the evil bad guy's lair on the door, right? But you may want to put like, maybe something generic like entrance. If it's a public area like this, right, you can put like, this is the 5 flagons in, because that would be public information. Merchant Square. So it's up to you. Usually for city areas, I think marking like businesses is a good idea. And then also marking generic things like, the district exits. For wilderness areas, I like to mark big features like caves. One of the things that's a little frustrating in Baldur's Gate, at least before we had the tab key from TOB, is that you could walk right past caves and other stuff and not even know that they're there. So adding a map note to be like, hey, there's a cave here. That's always a nice touch to let the players know. And then Zinmach wants to know, can we do an example of adding an actor? Sure. So let's go ahead and head back to our area. So for no reason whatsoever, let's add a lich here, because why not? Where would be an obnoxious place to fight a lich here? Let's put the lich right behind the trap, because the goal is hopefully that you'll go, oh, hey, a lich, and charge across and get flame striked, because, let's be jerks. So let's put the lich like somewhere here. And again, right, I mean, we're just adding a lich because we want to add something. So let me close out my other windows. Let's come back to the area. We're going to go back to edit. We're going to add an actor. We're going to put Cam's mean, tricky lich.
All right, we're going to put them, where did I say? Let's say 18, let's do 1900, 2133. 1900 and 33. Now you need to copy these because if you don't use the same thing as destination, like if this was still 0, the Lich would spawn and then immediately try to walk to coordinates 0. So we want him to stand still. We want him to be there. Is spawned. This is something that the engine uses internally. Don't mess with this. The animation is going to be a Lich animation. We want him to be facing, if he's going to be here, and presumably the party's coming from here, we want him to be facing this way. So we want to be north, northeast, or just north, one of those two. So this is also one of my little pet peeves is get your actors, if you just do it by default, all your actors will face south, which is very obvious and obnoxious. So pay attention to the orientation of your actors. Wander and follow distance. I would have to double check what those even mean. We want them to be present at all times. Number of times talk to. You can. So really quick, let's just. I think there's just a Licho one. Yeah, this is our generic Lich, the Licho one. So if you look at a Lich, right, he's got a script name. He's got 2 scripts assigned. If we want this Lich to be special and use a different script than the one that's set in his creature file, we can set that here. So if instead of using Mage 18 as his class script, we can give him a different class script. And the thing that's in the area file will override what's in his creature file. Like he'll load in, and instead of using Mage 18, if we change this to WTA Sight, which is hilarious because that means he wouldn't cast any spells, now he'll use WTA Sight as his class script instead of that nice Mage 18 combat AI script. So you could use these values here to override what is in his creature file. There are not too many times that this is going to be all that useful to you. Generally, if you have a creature that you want to do something special, you're probably just going to make your own creature. You're going to copy the Lich into, CD Lich and then give him whatever custom scripting or items or whatever it is you want him to have. So you can do this. Whether or not that's useful to you, maybe not. And then that's that's really it. The expiry time, like if they need to expire after a certain time, I think this is really only used for corpses. I'd have to check the ISDP. And then the wander and the follow distance, I think you can set these so that if you give a creature, I could be completely wrong. This is from memory because obviously I've not used these in a long time. I think if you give someone a random walk, this tells it how far to go before it should start wandering back to its primary location. I think. But that would basically be it. All right, let's go ahead and save it. Save, override, okay. Let's pop out really quick and come back in. And we should now have a Lich. Oh, did I put him in the wrong place? Because we should have somebody sitting right there. I put him at... what have I done wrong here? Let's take a look. Should I attach him? Let's see. Should not be attached. Is not spawned. Maybe the expiry time needs to be -1. All right, let's try this again. is not spawned. Creature is not attached. And let's make the expiry time -1. I think the coordinates are correct. That's a valid creature file. See, this is why most people just spawn things via script. There he is. Okay. Yep, there he is. There he is, and we even shows the animation. He's facing the proper direction. We're hopefully going to trick a fighter to going across that trap. And then because he's not overwriting any of his script, he's going to use the scripts that are in his normal file, which is going to be the normal kind of Mage 18 combat script. Which again, right, we had to talk about AI. If you just leave it as a generic Mage script, that means that something like Sword Coast Stratagems is going to come along and supercharge them. So there you go. That would be how you add an actor, just like that. So, like I said, the other thing is you could also just do in the area script, you could just do, say like, we're just going to copy this really quick. Except we're going to use EBO 700, spawn the Lich. Instead, we're going to set that global so that it doesn't repeat. And we're going to create creature Lich 01. And I think it's coordinates such as, I think it's like this. What's this guy at? 1900, 2133. And then north-northeast is, so it's 16 directions, south is 0, north is 8, and it goes clockwise. So north-northeast would be 9. Would be the direction. I think that's the syntax. All right, so this would be the alternative if you wanted to spawn them via script instead. I can't remember if these coordinates are. There are two ways to do coordinates, right? They're either like this, or sometimes coordinates are set like this with a comma in between. Let's take a look. Well, let's take a look at create creature in another script and see which is the proper syntax. Oh, let's create creature object. That's not what I want. Straight up create creature. Here we go. Okay, yeah, so it is like that. Yeah, so that would be how you just do create creature, the file name, the coordinates, and then the direction you want them to face when they spawn. So again, right, you have options. You can either do it as an actor, or you can do it as a spawn. The benefit to doing it as an actor is that you get control over if you want them to only be there at certain times. You can do that via scripting. You can deactivate them and activate them at the proper times. But the nice thing is, if you do want to do this, setting the checkboxes properly the first time is the easiest way to go. The other thing is if you wanted to overwrite their dialogue or their scripts, this is also how you could do it. But generally, if you're going to give a creature, if you're going to use a generic creature but want to do custom scripting for them, it's almost easier to duplicate the creature and then add the custom scripting at the creature level than it is necessarily at the area level. The one other advantage to an area is, like for here, let's look at this entire area really quick. Right? The party is going to be coming in from here or like one of the map edges or out of one of these two entrances, right? So it's going to take them some time to get to our Lich. Now imagine if you were coming out of this door and instead the Lich is supposed to be there and ambush you coming out of the door. Now, if you're relying on scripting for that, it could be a couple of script passes before, depending on what else is in the area script, there could be a couple of script passes before it says, oh, hey, it's time to spawn the Lich. Right? So you could have the situation where the party comes out of here and starts walking down, and then the Lich appears. Right? If it's in the area itself as an actor, it gets loaded with the area. So it will always, if it's an actor as opposed to it's being spawned by the area script, it will be here when the party comes out. Right? So if it's something near like an entrance, like if the Lich was instead here and the party can enter from the north, or if the Lich is here and the party can enter from the south, that's one benefit of doing the actor. Like the Lich will definitely be there and loaded ready for them. Right? If it's something like this where they're in the middle, right? There's no, unless the party is like control Jing immediately to where the Lich is supposed to be, which they shouldn't be, then this might matter. But that's a very niche, very edge case kind of situation. So it's just a matter of preference, right? I think if you look in, you could tell a lot of the SOD areas were done by modders, because there's quite a few areas where you're going to find that stuff is just spawned via the script rather than doing a proper actor listing in the area files. Because for the most of us, like for me, very rarely am I going to add an actor. Very rarely. It's almost always easier to just spawn them via script. But that's also because for the most part, I'm usually dealing with existing areas, in which case for an existing area, like if I'm adding creatures like the Bridge District or, Sendai's Lair or wherever, it's almost easier to do that like 99.9% of the time, it's going to be easier to do that via script than to try and add an actor to the area file. So if you're distributing an area, if it's a brand new area, the nice thing about it is if you just do it as an actor, you never have to worry about it gumming up the script, right? You can keep your scripting, you can keep your area script nice and clean. So it's, 6 of one, half dozen of the other. Personally, I find just scripting them to come in is easier, but there are, again, if they're going to be right next to like an entrance, using an actor may be a better idea. But then again, I'm so rarely am I actually working with a new area, right? Almost every time I'm adding an actor to an area, it's an existing area, in which case scripting is always easier. So, but that's, like I said, play around with it, see what works better for you. But I think that's it. I think we're at like the 3-hour mark. So unless anybody has any questions, I think we're going to go ahead and end it here. If you do have questions, actually leave them on the thread, because I'm going to call my wife. She should be in London. I'm going to make sure that her flight's on time and everything. I think I do want to do a Saturday stream. Somebody had mentioned on another Discord that they were interested in kits. And I think kits might be an interesting topic to cover. So yes, let's do a stream tomorrow. Let's do it at 9 a.m. just like the ones we've been doing. And tomorrow we're going to cover kits. We're not going to cover spell creation because we've kind of done that before, but I am going to talk about like how do kit tables work. What are some things you can and can't do with kits? How is it different between the originals and EEs? Because the EEs really soft coded a lot of stuff, so you can do a lot more with kits that you couldn't do on the originals. And I had written the original documentation about here's how you do kits, and that's, it's still like you can't do X, Y, and Z. It's like, well, on the E's, you can do X and Y at least. So I think kits will be a fun topic. So let's do that tomorrow. Again, at the same time, we'll do 9 a.m. Pacific. But otherwise, I think that's going to be it for the day. Thanks for joining. Appreciate it. Hope you learned something. Hope we had fun. And we will see you tomorrow. Goodbye, guys.